Hello everyone, Isaac here, your Fzone advisor. Today I wanted to show you how to set up an Fzone Pro Series dual stage regulator. It's pretty easy. But first, let's go over everything you need to set this up. You're going to need a CO2 tank, your Fzone Pro Series regulator, some of Fzone's CO2 tubing, and your method of diffusion. We are going to use Fzone's ceramic diffuser. Just a little side note though, make sure that you are using CO2 tubing and not airline tubing. The reason for this is that the tubing is going to undergo a lot of pressure, which airline tubing is not designed for. Okay, now that we have everything we need to get the system built, let's start with connecting our regulator to our CO2 tank. Right out of the box, the regulator comes with both a CGA 320 and a W21.8 connection type. The CGA 320 is the US standard, which fits a normal 5 to 10 pound tank we're used to. And then the W21.8 connection is the European standard. Before connecting the regulator to your CO2 tank, make sure you have the correct sealing ring to avoid any leaks. One thing to note is that the seal rings are different sizes based upon the connection type, so make sure you're using the proper ring. All we need to do is screw the regulator onto the tank and we're good to go. Now as you notice, there are 3 total knobs and 2 gauges, but we'll go into more detail on what those are later. Next, let's build out our CO2 line. This part is simple. We need to unscrew our bubble counter from the regulator and fill it with water. You can also use a plant-based glycerin, just make sure it's fragrance and dye-free. Next, we want to unscrew the top cap of the bubble counter, move that cap onto the CO2 tubing, push the tubing onto the end of the bubble counter's nipple, and screw down the cap. Just make sure the cap is tight, but don't over-tighten it. This connection can be a source of leaks. We'll go over how to troubleshoot these leaks later. Next, let's run our CO2 tubing up to our method of diffusion and cut it to its proper length. We don't want to leave a ton of extra length in the CO2 line, as it will take more time for the line to pressure up, thus delaying the injection of CO2 into our water. Just use the length you need to get from your regulator to your method of diffusion. At this point, you should have your regulator connected to your CO2 tank, your bubble counter filled with water, your CO2 tube cut to length. Lastly, we just need to install the Fzone ceramic diffuser onto the end of the CO2 tubing. That wasn't too bad, right? Next, it's time to turn everything on and check our connections. The first thing we need to do is plug our regulator in. You may hear a little click or ping noise, and that's just the electronic solenoid opening up. When the electronic solenoid is open, it allows CO2 to flow through the regulator. We suggest to use a small wall timer so that we can automate when it turns on and off. Next, before we open the CO2 tank, we want to make sure that the working pressure knob on the regulator is closed by turning it counterclockwise. We'll then open up the CO2 tank to start the flow to the regulator. As we open the CO2 tank by turning its knob, we will see the right gauge move. This shows us how much pressure is in our CO2 tank. Once the right gauge is showing pressure, we then want to turn the working pressure knob on our regulator. As we slowly turn it clockwise, the left gauge will start to move, showing us the working pressure. The working pressure gauge shows us how much pressure will be pushed into the CO2 tubing and to the method of diffusion, which in this case is our Fzone ceramic diffuser. The whole process of the regulator is to take the 1000 psi coming from our CO2 tank and regulate it down to 30-40 psi that is sent to our method of diffusion. That's why they call it a regulator. The working pressure we set the regulator to is dictated by the method of diffusion and can vary between products. In this case, since we're using our intake ceramic diffuser, we suggest you set your regulator to 30 to 40 psi. So we have the CO2 bottle open, which we can see from the right gauge. We have the working pressure set, which we can see from the left gauge. Next would be opening up our needle valve by turning the knob underneath the bubble counter. Just keep things real low and slow at the beginning. We really suggest using our Fzone drop checker, or learning the pH drop method to dial in your CO2. Now that everything is set up, now would be a good time to check our connections for leaks. To do this, we need to take some warm water, add some dish soap, mix it up, and drip some of this soapy water over our connections. If there is a leak in the connection, it'll start to bubble up, showing us exactly where it is so we can reset the connection. However, if you don't see any bubbles, then you know you don't have a leak and everything's connected properly. Pretty neat, huh? Okay, but what if you need to install an additional manifold? Let me show you how to do that. What you will need is the Allen wrench that was provided by Fzone in your regulator's box. Additionally, you'll need the new manifold and the 2 bolts that come with it. Fzone even includes some backup O-rings just in case one dries out in the future. The smaller O-ring is a replacement for the manifold. What needs to happen is the new manifold needs to go between the left arrowed manifold and the up arrow manifold. The manifold with the arrow pointing up is the end cap, so you'll want to make sure to reinstall that after adding your new manifold. Let's take this end manifold off, pop the new manifold in, and screw it down. Now it's not super obvious in this video, but as stated before, this new manifold cannot be used as the end cap because it has a hole in the middle which is going to allow gas to pass through it. Let's just pop these bolts on and screw it down. The bolts in the end cap just screw into the one before, allowing us to daisy chain manifolds together. Pretty cool, huh? Okay, let's get this end cap on and we'll start testing. So now we have the solenoid, manifold 1, manifold 2, and then the end cap. And then we'll just repeat the steps of filling our bubble counter, adding our CO2 tubing, adding the method of diffusion, and your new manifold is ready for operation. And that's it for this video. All of us at Fzone hopes this video helped you get your Fzone Pro Series dual stage regulator set up and running in no time. If you have any questions, please reach out to us on our website, and we hope you guys enjoy your new regulator.